So I'm on the banks of the Danube in the city of Ruse, or Rusa, in Bulgaria. Rusa is the second largest city in Bulgaria. Of course, there's been people here, as with the whole length of the Danube and other rivers in Europe, since the Stone Age. But the first people we can put a name to, whose name appears in the city in the history books, are the Thracians. Now, of course, the Greeks traded in this area, and stories in Greek mythology refer to this area. And the Romans colonized, and here at Rusa they established a fortified port which became an important trading post for the Roman Empire with the people to the north. And that lasted for several hundred years until eventually in the 6th century it fell victim to the many tribes that were coming from the north and eventually sacked the town. And the then Eastern Roman Empire was unable to withstand their attacks, mainly because they were preoccupied and their main effort was facing the Persians to the east. When Constantinople eventually fell in 1453 to the Turks, this area quickly came under the control of the Turks. And it remained so for over 400 years until 1877, when the Russians defeated the Turks, captured the city and gave it to the state of Bulgaria. And the Bulgars were just one of those tribes that invaded from the north during the Dark Ages. Gave their name, of course, to the present day state. Now, this is the Liberty statue in the centre of Ruse, and forgive the angle that I'm filming at. It's the only place I could find to get some protection from the sun pointing directly down the camera. Now, you will recall that in Lom I filmed a magnificent monument to freedom fighters. And if you'd looked carefully, you would have noticed at the bottom of the monument, in the inscription there, with the dates 1923 to 45. Now, after the First World War, the population of Bulgaria was 80% peasants living in the country, in an almost feudal state of serfdom, and 20% only in the cities. That percentage is almost reversed now, and there's only 26% of people living in the country. But after the war, like everywhere else in Europe, Bulgaria went through a period of huge social change, and the peasants of the countryside began to find a voice, and two movements arose in Bulgaria: the agrarian movement, which was mainly based in the country, and the communists, that was mainly based in the cities. Now, these two organisations had found a voice by 1923 and were a significant influence and power in the country's government. Now, this disturbed the establishment, and in 1923 the army, through a coup d'etat, overthrew the existing socialist government and inserted a right-wing reactionary government. And in response to this, the agrarian movement rose up in revolt, but was ruthlessly crushed by the army. Now, in sharp contrast, the communists, while this was going on, sat on their hands, much to the consternation of Comintern, the Russian Bureau for Promoting International Communism, who harangued the Communist Party of Bulgaria and urged them to rise up, which they did, prematurely and without the necessary prior preparation and planning. And they too were ruthlessly crushed. But those two events in 1923 are seen today as the start of the struggle to free the working people of Bulgaria from the shackles of serfdom. Now, that struggle didn't end until the Soviets invaded the country unopposed at the end of the Second World War and established a communist regime in the country, which in itself, of course, imposed restrictions and almost a form of slavery, for want of better words, of its own. But now, of course, the country is free, it's a member of the European Union, and the people are learning to deal with the imperfections of the democratic system. So they've got a big 15-kilometre race going on here today. I've just got in on the start of it, so here they all come running down one of the main boulevards. It's an international race apparently, so looks like a pretty strong field. Interesting mix of influences in the architecture here. You can clearly detect an Italian influence in some of the Rococo and Baroque styles, but there's also a very French influence here. Look at the roof of that place, that's very typically French. And there's an Eastern influence that you can see every now and again as well, which is interesting, which harps back to the Turkish occupation of this area. People watching is one of my favourite pastimes, and it's no less interesting here than it is anywhere else. Well, I have to tell you, I don't think there's much wrong in a country where the beer is £1.20 a pint, where Lidl is the supermarket of choice for the chattering classes, where if you ask for sugar to go in your coffee, you're looked at as if there's something seriously wrong with you. And if you're a young person under the age of 30 and you indulge in country folk dancing, it's not the social kiss of death. So actually I rather like Bulgaria. There's a lot to be said for it.